to bring on private altars. What would you bring on the private altar? You would bring the blood, and the limbs would be burnt on the altar, and the flesh was eaten there, and it was all good. Those are three things: the blood, the flesh, and the limbs that were burnt on the altar. And that's how it was done. So those three things that are permissible when there was no temple, when it was in between temples, when they just had that temporary tabernacle and noiv or givon. So during that time,
this is between the Mishkan and the first one, or the first and the second?
Between Shiloh and maybe before Shiloh as well, I think this was allowed. So so those three things become forbidden after the temple's built, and thoughts of doing it, of sprinkling the blood where those three things would have been permissible invalidates the sacrifice. To thoughts of bringing the blood inside the sanctuary, which the blood doesn't belong there, but it was never permissible to burn the limbs and to eat the meat inside the sanctuary. So we know that that's not the case. That's not what we're referring to when we say that thoughts out of the appropriate place invalidate the sacrifice. Only thoughts where it was permissible, those three things, invalidate the sacrifice. But thoughts of bringing it into the sanctuary, which those three things were never permissible, so that doesn't invalidate the sacrifice. And I learned it from Bayom HaShlishi, which is on the third day, which that was extra. That teaches me that it needs to be the three things that were permissible would invalidate if you bring the blood, if you have thoughts of bringing the blood to that place.
How does the third day get?
Yeah, that was a discussion back on. I think the first, when we just started the Shir, we started the Shir Rosh Chodesh Sivan, so it's almost 2 months. So about 60 days ago, that's what it was. The whole discussion there. It seemed to be that it was an extra term that wasn't necessary, and we learned from the. Okay, Daf Lamed or Daf Chavtes. Now the Gemara asks, let's take a lenient approach. Let's say that thoughts of bringing the blood outside should not invalidate the sacrifice. Why? Just as a place where the blood would actually invalidate the other blood. The blood that goes inside would invalidate the blood that remains in the courtyard. But however, ein machshava peiseles bifnim, but thoughts of the blood going inside do not invalidate the sacrifice. Makom sheloi pasal dam shebachutz shebifnim, a place where the blood going out does not invalidate the blood that's inside. Ein din shloi pasal machshava bachutz. Is it not a kal v'chomer that the thoughts of taking it out should not invalidate? If it actually doesn't, why should thoughts do it? And you see that clearly from the...
So it's saying that the one that was taken out should be fine also. The one that's in is fine, right, and the one that was taken out should also be fine.
Well, not that should be fine, but that it shouldn't invalidate the other one that remains inside.
Okay.
It doesn't. The one that goes outside doesn't invalidate the one that's inside, but because of that, the thoughts of taking it outside should also not invalidate. Because that's what we find by thoughts of inside doesn't invalidate. And over there it's more strict.
Wait, would you say it again? So not the actual taking itself, the thoughts of taking.
Right. Taking the blood inside invalidates the entire sacrifice. Right. According to this opinion. Thinking of going inside, of taking it inside, doesn't. Right. So taking the blood outside doesn't invalidate the sacrifice.
Right.
So thinking of it should for sure not invalidate the sacrifice, right? So Talmud Leimar Shlishi. Is it missing a word here? No. Talmud Leimar Shlishi. It says on the third day, and that's referring to Chutz Lizmanai. It's referring to out of its time, and then it uses the word pigel, which actually is usually the term used for out of its time. But here in this verse, it's extra. It's coming to teach me Chutz L'Mkaimai that if you have thoughts of eating it or sprinkling the blood out of its place, out of its allotted place, then that invalidates of offering it or sprinkling its blood out of its allotted place. That invalidates it. Okay. So we know clearly that the halachas that we set up. You can't use a kal v'chaimer just to get rid of it, because something logical. The verse actually says what the rule is. Okay, basar. We're supposed to read these parentheses, these brackets. I guess so. In yeshiva, they always told us that you read the brackets, right? In the parentheses, you skip. Brackets, you read in parentheses. I don't know if it works in kachim. Basar hayotze lachutz is pasal. If the blood, if the meat goes outside the azara, outside the courtyard, it becomes pasal. Hanichnas lefnim, but the meat that goes inside the sanctuary, it's kosher. Sheyeh bedin, because I could have thought differently. Sheyeh bedin shepasal. It could have been that it was pasal. How would it be that it was pasal? But ma b'makim, just as a place shalei pasal dam shebachutz, where the blood that remains in the courtyard does not become invalid. Shalei pasal dam shebachutz shebifnim, that the blood that leaves, the blood that goes outside the courtyard doesn't invalidate the blood that stays inside the courtyard. So basar hayotze lachutz, but the meat that goes outside the courtyard, pasal.
Pasal is the meat himself.
The meat itself. I think it's the meat itself.
Yeah,
right. So let's see. Makaim shepasal dam shebefnim shebachutz. A place where the blood does invalidate what's remaining outside, what's remaining in the courtyard. So basar hanichnas bifnim, the meat that enters inside, einay din sheyifsal, is it not a kal v'chaimer that it should invalidate, that it should become invalid? We're talking about the meat that went inside? I guess so. It must be the meat that went inside. Yeah, not other meat. The meat that went inside. We're saying like this, that if meat goes outside, it becomes invalid. And it's interesting because we're comparing it to, we're showing that going outside is not such a serious thing because it doesn't invalidate the whole sacrifice if the blood would go outside. But nevertheless, the meat that goes outside is invalid. So, going inside, where that is a serious thing, because blood that goes inside does invalidate the whole sacrifice, according to this opinion. Should the meat that go inside not become invalid? That's what I could have thought. So Harei Oimer midama, dama v'lei basar. It's only the blood. We said from the blood. The blood it would invalidate, but not the meat. So now the Gemara says, kal v'chaimer me'ata. From this, you should have a kal v'chaimer the other way. Ma b'makim shepasal dam shebifnim shebachutz. Just as the blood that goes inside invalidates the blood that's outside, and the sacrifice is invalid. So basar nichnas lifnim. But however, the meat that goes inside is still kosher because I learned that from a verse. So makim shaloi pasal dam shebachutz, a place where the blood does not invalidate es shebifnim, what's left inside. But however, basar hayotze lachutz, the meat that goes outside, any din kosher, is it not a kal v'chaimer that it should be kosher? Right?
That's what they say. Because that blood that goes out is for pasal, and this meat that goes out should also be pasal.
Yeah. So we're saying that we're talking about the location. If this location, which is normally more strict, we see regarding the blood, but however, when it comes to the meat, it's lenient. So that's the going inside the sanctuary. So going out, which is more lenient, for sure should be lenient with the meat going out, and we know that that's not the case. Harei Oimer, the pasuk says, we learn it from a pasuk that meat that's in the field, which is torn, you shall not eat. Why? What does it mean in the field? In the field means that we're talking about here. It's interesting. Usually you think it's talking about treifa meat that was not shechted or whatever. It says, Once it leaves the courtyard, that's what it means a field. Once it leaves the open area, it's talking about a sacrifice. The Gemara learns that it's talking about a sacrifice. If it leaves the enclosed area of the courtyard, it becomes invalid. You can't eat it. Okay, this is a very interesting Gemara. The next piece, Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught Pnima. It says that this is talking about the inauguration ceremony. Was the blood brought into the sanctuary inside? You should have eaten it, right? This is the. It says, was it brought into the sanctuary inside the sanctuary? Ainli ela pnima. I would only know that if it's brought inside, pnima would be inside. There's two sanctuaries there.
I mean, the Kodesh Kodashim.
Kodesh Kodashim. Pnima means inside. Eichel minayin. How do you know that it already would become invalid if it enters into the second room in the inside, which is called the Kodesh? There's the Kodesh and the Kodesh Kodashim. Kodesh Kodashim is the Holy of Holies. The room in front of it is called the Kodesh. In Mishnaic Hebrew, in biblical Hebrew, the inside is called the Dvir, I think. So Pnima, here the word is Pnima. Pnima means inside. And Kodesh means the holies. So it says both. It says Bakodesh Pnima, in the very inside. How do you know that it means even in the Heichal, which is in the second room, in the outer room? It says in the holy inside. The Gemara asks, it's a brisa. Yomer Kodesh val Yomer Pnima. Why do you have to say Pnima? Just say in the Kodesh, in the Heichal, in the outer chamber, and automatically you'd know that if it's in the outer chamber, you'll know that it's going to be invalid if it goes into the Kodesh Kodashim.
Isn't it the opposite way? If it's not good in the Heichal,
then for sure, that's what the Gemara is asking. Very good. That's what the Gemara is asking. It's a Kal V'Chomer. Just say Bakodesh, and you don't need Pnima. So Amar Rava says, what Rava is going to tell you here is that the terms themselves need to be defined. And if you don't have both words here, you're not going to define the terms the same way. How does he know this? He learns this from another source. This one is teaching on that one. In other words, if it doesn't say Bakodesh Pnima, I would have thought that Bakodesh means the Kodesh Kodashim.
Oh.
So it has to say Bakodesh Pnima to teach me that Pnima is the Kodesh Kodashim. That teaches me that Kodesh means the Heichal. But he's going to bring an example for this from another source. Midi dahavi atayshah v'sacher. Just like it's talking about a taishav is a resident and a sacher is a hired worker, but here it's talking about two types of Jewish slaves. The rule is that a non-Jewish slave that's owned by a kohen is allowed to eat truma together with his master. What about a Jewish slave? A Jewish slave that's owned by a kohen. He's not the property of his master. So let's see.
Should be a Kal V'Chomer.
Well, it's not necessarily because he
If
may have
a boy
independent.
can eat it for sure.
Yeah, but over there he's owned. He's part of the
But just-
family.
yeah, but
here he's
he's
still
also-
independent.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Let's see.
No, but
You'll see.
if you have an Evid Ivri,
You're saying at least he's
Jewish.
Jewish.
Has an Evid Ivri.
You're saying at least he's Jewish, right? Okay, let's see this. The Tanya was taught in the Brisa, Taishav, a resident, Zekoni Kinyan Olam. That's the one that's acquired forever. Forever means 50 years because his ear was pierced. I mean, a slave whose ear was pierced stays for 50 years. Sachir is the hired worker. Zekoni Kinyan Shanim. He's only acquired for years, which is 7 years. And the pasuk says that a Taishav, Kohen, and a Sachir should not eat Kodesh. They shouldn't eat Truma. So the Gemara asks, Yermer Taishav al Yermer Sachir. Why don't you just say that the Taishav can't eat Truma, which means the one that's for 50 years, he can't eat Truma. For sure the Sachir can't eat. Bani Yomer, I would have said, if he's acquired for 50 years, he can't eat Truma. So Kani Kinyan Shanim like Kolshkein. If he's only there for 7 years, for sure he can't eat Truma. He's only by the Kayan for 7 years. He's a much more temporary a Kayan. He belongs to the Kayan for much less time. So Ilu Kain, if you would say so, if it would only say one of them, the Taishav, but you say Taishav Zekani Kinyan Shanim, I would have translated that Taishav, the resident, is referring to someone that's only there for years, for 7 years. Aval Kana Kinyan Oila. And as I wouldn't have known what the terms meant, but I would have thought in that case that Kana Kinyan Oilam, if he's acquired for 50 years, I would think that he's able to eat Truma. So Basacher, that's why it says that a hired worker, Velimit al Taishav, and it teaches me what it means that, by the word resident. That this one is acquired for 50 years and this one is acquired for only 7 years. And both of them both of them don't eat. So that's what Rav is telling me. That the reason why it needs to say B'Kodesh Pnima is to teach me that Pnima means the Kodesh Kadashim, Kodesh means the Heichal. Or else if it only would have said Kodesh, I would have thought that that's the Kodesh Kadashim. Can't compare. Over there it's two separate people. I would have thought that both of them, I would have thought that you need both, I would have thought that if it only said one term, it was talking about the more lenient one. And I would have thought that the other one would have been allowed to eat Truma. However, here, even though the pasuk could have said Nirtza Layoichal, the one whose ear was pierced, but it doesn't. But nevertheless, I would have learned that if the Nirtza, if the one whose ear was pierced is not allowed to eat Truma, so for sure the one that's there only for 7 years for sure should not be able to eat Truma. But why does the pasuk have to say it? Because milsa dasi b'kal v'chemer tarich because of lakra. Just because it's logical doesn't mean that the pasuk doesn't write it. The pasuk writes things that are logical. It's machlekes if the pasuk does this. But nevertheless, I could have said this. Alahacha kivan de ifsal behechal lefnai v'lefnim my boy. Abai is questioning like this. I have two separate people. The Torah tells me that both of them can't eat Truma. Could have only said one, and I would have known the other one with the Kal V'Chaimer. But the Torah wants to tell me both because it says it explicitly, even though a Kal V'Chaimer would have been satisfactory. However, that doesn't explain meat that's going into the sanctuary. It doesn't need to say if it goes into the Holy of Holies. Because if it can't go into the sanctuary, how does it get to the Holy of Holies? You can't get to the Holy of Holies without walking through the sanctuary. There's no way in. So over there it would need to say two. Over here it only needs to say one. I don't need to say both. Basically, what he's asking is, there's no din of Kodesh Kadashim. There's no halacha that it becomes puzzle in the Kodesh Kadashim, because it's never puzzle in the Kodesh Kadashim, because it was always puzzle beforehand. Kodesh Kadashim does nothing. You already invalidated before you got in there. Okay. So, Elamar Abaya, rather Abaya says, we're talking about that you got through in a roundabout way. How do you get through? I don't know, you went through the ceiling or something. Amalei Rava v'habak sivbei. But it says that you entered. Elam Rava kol midi d'chashav alel lifnai v'lifnim le'mifsal beheichal. Rava says that if his intention is to bring into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, to sprinkle it there, so it doesn't become invalid in the heichal. And if you take it out into the Azara, it's not invalid. So really there's two separate halachas. Blood that you intended to take into the Heichal becomes invalid in the Heichal. But if you intended to take it into the Kodesh Kodashim and you only got to the Heichal, it doesn't become invalid. Very interesting halacha here. Okay. Unfortunately, we're one day behind. And I don't know how to catch up. So, we're a day behind. The only thing I can think of is Sunday. Sunday we start at 6:30. We'll try to catch up. But meanwhile, I'm a day behind. We're supposed to be 84. 83. We're supposed to be 83. We just did 82. I'm sorry. Okay.
Okay, you too.
All right, thanks so much.
See you later.